The night sky over Normandy was alive with the faint hum of aircraft, a signal that history was about to be rewritten. Thousands of American paratroopers, members of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, were poised to descend into darkness, unaware of the precise dangers below. For German officers like Major Friedrich von der Heydte, the first reports of parachute landings seemed almost unbelievable. How could such a small, lightly armed force cause such disruption behind enemy lines? As the first paratroopers hit the fields and hedgerows, chaos erupted. Many landed far from their designated drop zones. Yet instead of succumbing to confusion, these soldiers improvised, moving swiftly to rally and complete their missions. The German command had expected predictable, organized attacks, units moving in strict formation. What they encountered instead was a storm of unpredictability. Small groups of Americans struck villages, bridges, and road junctions with aggressive, coordinated precision, often outnumbered but never outmatched in courage. In the villages of Sainte-Mère-Église and the surrounding countryside, terrified German officers recorded their astonishment in diaries, describing fanatical and reckless enemy troops who seemed to appear from nowhere, strike hard, and vanish into the fog. Among these daring assaults, one of the earliest and most remarkable involved a small group of paratroopers tasked with securing vital exits from the drop zones. Armed with determination rather than numbers, they disrupted German communications and delayed reinforcements, turning what could have been disaster into strategic advantage. German reports noted their ingenuity, adaptability, and almost fearless approach to combat. Even simple acts like cutting telephone lines or taking control of a crossroads caused disproportionate anxiety among defenders who were used to conventional tactics. As the night unfolded, the full scale of the airborne operation became clear. Thousands of paratroopers scattered across Normandy were creating multiple simultaneous crises for German units. The defenders struggled to comprehend how such lightly equipped troops could paralyze entire sectors. Diaries from the front lines repeatedly mention the word fear, not of numbers, but of unpredictability and relentless initiative. Each encounter reinforced the growing impression that these Americans operated under a different set of rules, ones the German army had never faced before. Paratroopers demonstrated remarkable coordination even while isolated, signaling and linking with other scattered units through prearranged codes and runners. They captured key positions such as crossroads, small towns, and defensive strongpoints that German forces had assumed were secure. Their use of limited resources, from a single machine gun to improvised demolitions, multiplied their effectiveness. German intelligence quickly learned that traditional counterattacks often failed because the Americans did not wait for orders or formations. They acted on initiative, striking where least expected. By the time dawn approached, the initial chaos had begun to crystallize into opportunity. American paratroopers, though scattered and isolated, had accomplished critical objectives that would pave the way for the larger invasion. German officers, exhausted and unnerved, continued to jot down notes of admiration mixed with apprehension. They recognized a new kind of warfare emerging, one driven by courage, improvisation, and aggressive decentralization. The first night of D-Day had ended, but its echoes of fear, respect, and awe would fill German diaries for months to come, shaping the perception of the American soldier for the remainder of the war. The morning after the initial drop revealed the remarkable audacity of the paratroopers. At Brecourt Manor, a small but strategically vital German artillery position threatened the success of the entire landing on Utah Beach. Intelligence had underestimated both the position's importance and the resolve of the American soldiers who would confront it. A group led by First Lieutenant Richard Dick Winters of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment moved swiftly, knowing that delay could cost hundreds of lives. With just a handful of men, Winters assessed the defenses, planned an attack, and executed it with precision that would become legendary.
German soldiers, entrenched and confident in their numbers, were stunned. They had never faced such aggressive, coordinated strikes from so few attackers. Winter's team used the terrain to their advantage, approaching under cover, neutralizing machine gun nests, and turning the enemy's artillery against them. Within hours, the position was captured and the threat to the landing forces was neutralized. German diary entries from this engagement described the Americans as unpredictable, relentless, and fearless, expressing fear and disbelief at how a small unit could accomplish what larger forces might have struggled with for days. The success at Brecourt Manor was not an isolated incident. Similar skirmishes unfolded across Normandy, with scattered paratroopers using initiative and ingenuity to outmaneuver the enemy. They communicated silently, adapted to chaotic landings, and seized opportunities that conventional military doctrine would have deemed impossible. Each encounter amplified the sense among German officers that they were confronting a new breed of soldier, one who thrived in disorder and embraced decentralized leadership. Paratroopers displayed incredible resourcefulness. They repurposed captured enemy weapons, coordinated improvised assaults, and established temporary strongpoints in fields, hedgerows, and small villages. Even when cut off from their units, soldiers like Winters ensured that morale remained high and objectives stayed in focus. German reports noted the psychological effect of these daring strikes. Defenders were constantly uncertain where the next attack would come from, making their responses slow and disorganized. It was a battlefield of shadows and surprise, where every American decision carried outsized consequences. The battle demonstrated the power of training, trust, and decisive action. Paratroopers acted with autonomy, making life-or-death decisions on the spot, while their enemies, accustomed to rigid command structures, struggled to respond. Diaries repeatedly noted the psychological impact. Fear, confusion, and frustration dominated the German perspective. These small-scale operations, often overlooked in grander narratives, had a disproportionate effect on the outcome of the invasion. By the end of the day, Brecourt Manor had become a symbol of what American paratroopers could achieve under extreme conditions. The ability to turn confusion into advantage, to strike where least expected, and to act decisively with minimal resources reshaped the German understanding of warfare. Observers noted that even when outnumbered or isolated, these soldiers displayed a combination of courage, discipline, and creativity that would define airborne operations for the remainder of World War II. The audacity at Brecourt Manor foreshadowed the relentless drive and unpredictability that German officers would continue to record with both fear and admiration in their diaries.
As the paratroopers moved deeper into Normandy, the town of Sainte-Mère-Église became a focal point of their daring operations. This small village, nestled along key roads and crossroads, was vital for controlling movement inland from Utah Beach. The American soldiers, scattered across the countryside after chaotic night drops, knew that securing Sainte-Mère-Église was essential to prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Among them, Private John Steele became an unwitting symbol of the invasion when he became caught on the church steeple, hanging perilously from his parachute while German soldiers tried to take aim. His survival and the determination of those around him highlighted the extreme risks and unexpected heroism that defined the airborne campaign. German officers documented their disbelief and fear as paratroopers, despite being scattered and disoriented, rapidly organized into effective fighting units. Groups of Americans seized buildings, controlled streets, and repelled counterattacks with skill and tenacity. The defenders struggled to predict their movements. Diaries repeatedly described the paratroopers as wild and fanatical, noting that they did not wait for orders but acted independently, striking at the weakest points and disappearing before German reinforcements could react.
At Sainte-Mère-Église, the Americans' decentralized approach created confusion among the German defenders. Officers who were accustomed to strict military hierarchy found it impossible to track or counter the fluid American movements. Snipers, machine gun teams, and small squads attacked with precision, exploiting the terrain and enemy misjudgments. Paratroopers moved from house to house, hedgerow to hedgerow, turning the village into a labyrinth of controlled chaos. German reports emphasized that these Americans seemed almost fearless, advancing boldly even when outnumbered and isolated. Beyond Sainte-Mère-Église, similar actions unfolded in nearby towns and crossroads. Paratroopers disrupted supply lines, ambushed reinforcements, and captured strategic bridges that were supposed to secure German retreat and communication. Their actions delayed enemy movements and caused panic among local commanders, who recorded their growing anxiety in diaries and reports. Even the simplest tactical decisions by the Americans, like cutting phone lines or setting up temporary defensive positions, magnified their effect, as German forces could not predict the next move. The impact of these scattered operations extended far beyond individual skirmishes. Each small victory created ripple effects, isolating German units and making it nearly impossible to coordinate counterattacks. Paratroopers demonstrated the effectiveness of initiative, improvisation, and boldness, which became trademarks of the Airborne Divisions. Their ability to turn disorganization into an advantage confounded the enemy and shifted the momentum of the campaign. By the time daylight illuminated the Normandy countryside, Sainte-Mère-Église and surrounding towns were in American hands. German officers, exhausted and unnerved, continued to write about the ferocity and unpredictability of these paratroopers. Their diaries reflected a mix of fear, astonishment, and grudging respect. The scattered men of the 92nd and 101st Airborne Divisions had proven that even in confusion and isolation, they could achieve decisive objectives. The events in Sainte-Mère-Église set the tone for the remainder of the Normandy invasion, demonstrating that courage, adaptability, and decentralized leadership could outmatch numbers, fortifications, and traditional military doctrine.
Scattered across the Normandy countryside, American paratroopers faced a daunting reality. Many had landed miles from their intended drop zones, isolated in unfamiliar fields, hedgerows, and villages. Yet what might have been disaster became an opportunity. Small groups of soldiers, often no larger than a squad, acted with remarkable initiative, improvising strategies and coordinating attacks without direct orders. Their ability to adapt to chaos frustrated German officers who had expected organized resistance to conventional tactics. Diaries from the front repeatedly mention the word bewilderment alongside fear, as German units struggled to track and predict these unpredictable forces. In villages, crossroads, and key defensive positions, paratroopers used every advantage at their disposal. Machine guns were repurposed, grenades thrown with precision, and even captured German equipment turned against its former owners. They seized bridges, disrupted supply lines, and ambushed reinforcements, often achieving results far beyond what their numbers should have allowed. Observers noted that these Americans seemed to thrive in confusion, moving swiftly, striking decisively, and then vanishing before a counterattack could take shape. The Germans were forced to contend with a new kind of enemy, one that did not rely on rigid formations, but on adaptability, aggression, and initiative. Communication and coordination among the scattered units became a lifeline. Paratroopers sent runners, used signals, and relied on prearranged plans to link with other groups. Even when cut off from their battalion, soldiers like Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krauss organized defenses and led counterattacks with decisive authority. Their actions were a direct challenge to the traditional German command structure, which relied heavily on centralized decision-making.
German diaries noted the psychological impact of these independent operations, often describing the Americans as untamed and fanatical, capable of turning any situation to their advantage. The scattered nature of the drops also created constant uncertainty for German commanders. They never knew where the next threat would come from, making it nearly impossible to consolidate forces or respond effectively. Every skirmish, no matter how small, had outsized consequences. Fields and hedgerows became battlefields where skill, initiative, and audacity outweighed raw numbers. Even minor successes like taking a crossroads or securing a small village disrupted the enemy's plans and bought crucial time for the main invasion forces. By using decentralization and rapid decision-making, paratroopers turned potential chaos into an advantage. Their ability to improvise under pressure, adapt to ever-changing circumstances, and strike aggressively left German officers both terrified and deeply impressed. Each encounter reinforced the perception that these soldiers were unlike any they had faced before. German intelligence noted that these paratroopers seemed to anticipate moves before they happened, reacting with an almost instinctive understanding of the battlefield. The scattered paratroopers of Normandy had proven that bravery, creativity, and relentless initiative could change the course of battle, sowing confusion, fear, and respect in equal measure among their adversaries. Their actions became a blueprint for what modern airborne operations could achieve, reshaping the understanding of warfare for years to come.
As the Normandy campaign progressed, the American paratroopers' influence extended far beyond their initial drops. Their daring actions at towns like Carentan and Bastogne demonstrated that scattered units could hold critical positions against far larger forces. During the Battle of Carentan, soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division engaged in fierce urban combat, clearing streets and defending key bridges that allowed the main invasion forces to advance inland. Their bravery, ingenuity, and willingness to take the fight to the enemy left German officers in a state of constant alarm, documenting in their diaries the unpredictability and relentless aggression of the Americans. At Bastogne, during the Battle of the Bulge, months later, the same ethos of courage and initiative prevailed. Encircled by superior German forces, paratroopers held the town with a determination that became legendary. General Anthony McAuliffe's defiant reply of "nuts" to a German surrender ultimatum symbolized the spirit that had been forged in Normandy. Soldiers like Staff Sergeant Harrison Summers and Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krauss, who had seen the chaos of night drops and the scattered operations of D-Day, applied the same principles of decentralized leadership, resourcefulness, and aggressive tactics under extreme pressure. German officers reflecting on these engagements repeatedly noted the same themes in their diaries: fear, confusion, and astonishment. The Americans did not conform to conventional military expectations. They struck without warning, adapted instantly to evolving situations, and leveraged every advantage, no matter how small. Even when isolated or outnumbered, paratroopers found ways to disrupt enemy plans, secure strategic points, and inspire awe among their adversaries. Their decentralized approach left German forces constantly off balance, uncertain where the next strike would come from, and forced commanders to rethink traditional defensive strategies. The cumulative effect of these operations was profound. Paratroopers shaped the outcomes of battles, protected key infrastructure, and bought precious time for follow-on forces. They turned chaos into opportunity, confusion into strategic advantage, and fear into a weapon against the enemy. Diaries from German officers reveal that the psychological impact of the airborne divisions often outweighed their numerical strength, with accounts repeatedly describing the Americans as fearless, unpredictable, and unlike any troops we have faced. By the end of the war, the legacy of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions was firmly established. Their actions in Normandy, Carentan, and Bastogne demonstrated the power of courage, initiative, and decentralized leadership. German officers, who had once written about them with fear, came to acknowledge their skill, bravery, and indomitable spirit. The paratroopers' achievements not only changed the course of battles, but also reshaped the German understanding of modern warfare. Their stories, recorded in diaries, reports, and first-hand accounts, stand as a testament to the men who, through audacity, adaptability, and relentless determination, left an enduring mark on history. Many officers admitted that facing these paratroopers required constant vigilance, quick thinking, and an acceptance that traditional rules of engagement no longer applied. The Americans' ability to innovate on the battlefield created a new standard for airborne operations and left an unforgettable impression on friend and foe alike.